Shalom. I'm Rabbi Michael Panitz, and I'm speaking to you from Los Angeles on May 19th, 2021. I'd like to speak to you today about the ethical loneliness of the Israel supporter today. And I must begin with a confession that I'm speaking from a place of sadness. A week and a half into the latest round of Israel-Hamas violence, the sense of deja vu all over again is so strong as to be oppressive. This is what happens. It has happened before. It happened in 2014. It will probably happen again. Whenever Hamas is ready, because it is always a matter of Hamas deciding when to return to the arena of aggression. Hamas starts a round of violence. The terrorists, that's what they are. The terrorists who are Hamas do so by massive acts of naked aggression. These are acts that no country should be expected to have to accept without responding. They fire hundreds and ultimately thousands of explosive charged missiles toward Israeli population centers. 1 in 7 of those rockets lands in the Gaza Strip itself, causing Palestinian casualties. But no voices are raised to blame Hamas for the deaths of Palestinians that they have directly caused. The majority of the rockets travel to Israeli airspace. Israeli technology and Israeli investment in sheltering its civilians result in relatively few fatalities, although of course in many more wounded and many, many more traumatized from these unprovoked attacks. And then Israel retaliates, does not initiate, retaliates, specifically in order to weaken the ability of Hamas to wage war, to launch death through the skies. But Israel aims at military targets, and yet Hamas shields its weapons with civilians. This is an obscene parody of what civilized nations do, including Israel, defending civilians by weapons, not vice versa. Consequently, hundreds of Gazans die. But Hamas does not merely accept that, they plan for that. They use it cynically, because at that point, the world blames Israel, because it had the temerity to defend itself, or perhaps because in the eyes of some, the lower number of Israeli fatalities somehow means that Israel is automatically in the wrong. After a number of days, Israel comes under increasing pressure to accede to a ceasefire. Remember that a premature ceasefire simply means that it's that much sooner that Hamas can begin this deadly round all over again. And then when Israel does agree to a ceasefire, at the very end, Hamas will fire off a final salvo of missiles to claim that it started and that it concluded the round on its own terms, to argue to its own internal audience that it has had another victory. This is all so clear to me, but the world seems unwilling to signify that 1 + 1 = 2. Or perhaps the world is unable to signify that. This is where the concept of ethical loneliness comes in. Ethical loneliness is a concept described by the Holocaust survivor Jean Amery. As the philosopher Jill Stauffer explains it, ethical loneliness is the isolation one feels when one, as a violated person or as a member of a persecuted group, has been abandoned by humanity, emerging from injustice only to find that the surrounding world will not or cannot properly hear their testimony, their claims about what they have suffered and about what is now owed them on their own terms. As a Jew, I have been nourished by the support of many Gentiles who recognize the enormous evil of anti-Semitism. And yet, that recognition is easily challenged and quickly evaporates. It was challenged by the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in 2017, and it is evaporating quickly during the current hostilities. This year, 2021, we Jews have been attacked from the right, from the left, and from Palestinian vectors. The January 6th attack on Congress, with the barbarians at the gates of our secular temple of democracy brandishing Confederate battle flags, featured a frightening crossover of anti-democratic and anti-Semitic forces on the right end of our political spectrum. I was afraid, both as an American and as a Jew, with neo-Nazis roaming the congressional halls looking for someone to lynch. But now, the attacks on Jews come loudly from voices on the left. The leadership of Black Lives Matter has declared its solidarity with the Palestinian cause, as if Israel, and not Hamas, is the source of bigotry and terror. Truly, if ever there was a slogan that is true as a matter of principle, but deplorably served by its actual leadership, it is Black Lives Matter. Of course, Black Lives Matter. The ideal of interracial justice deserves far better than its institutional leaders. Likewise, the leaders of the movement for equality for people across the lines of sexual orientation has also shown its acute moral astigmatism. This leadership ignores what Hamas actually does to non-heterosexuals, and it chooses to demonize Israel, the only country in the region that has a gay pride parade, the only country in the region where the civil rights of people are respected regardless of sexual orientation. The stance of these leaders has the stench of hypocrisy. And then there is the anti-Semitism from Palestinians themselves. About 1 mile from where I am right now in Los Angeles, just last night, there was an attack conducted by Palestinians on local patrons of a sushi restaurant. They came as a gang, they demanded to know who is a Jew, and they beat several diners mercilessly. For all who may strain to find a difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, note well, they did not ask who is a Zionist. They asked who is a Jew. They showed their true anti-Semitic colors. Would that their woke defenders would take notice. Israel is accustomed to going it nearly alone. Perhaps Jews worldwide need to cultivate some of that inner toughness. But is it too much to ask of those who deplore injustice elsewhere in the world also to deplore the open bigotry of jihad-fueled terrorism, such as practiced by Hamas? Yes, we Jews are an ethically lonely people today. We call to each other in our loneliness and say, Chazak, Chazak v'nit chazek. Be strong, let us strengthen one another. And we also call to those who profess to love the people Israel, stand with us now, for this is our hour of need. Amen.